Welcome all of you. Today we will revise our history chapter 2 from hunting gathering to growing food, and the chapter is also named in some book like on the trail of the earliest people. Okay, so student, today we will revise the important points of this chapter only. Okay, so by these important points you will understand the key factors and why this chapter is very important. Okay, so student, first of all, you know that earliest people use stone tools, and these stone tools were very useful for them for digging the ground, to collect edible roots, right? And they are stitching clothes made out of animal skins. So means like these you can see in the figure, in these pictures also, the earliest people were using these tools for the digging the ground and for stitching the clothes also. Means from the animal skins they were making the clothes for themselves, and they were stitching them from these stone tools only, because the metal was not invented at that time. That's why they were using these stones only for their work. Okay, students, archaeologists find some places, some important archaeologist site, and they found some places where they found the trace of earliest human, means earliest man. So in this map you can see the places are marked in this blue square. So here are some places like Burjahom in Jammu and Kashmir, and in that Mehargarh in Pakistan, and this place is also Koldiwala and Dojali. These places are these are some places where archaeologists find some trace of the earliest man. But if you will notice that these places are nearby the river, and there are some caves also there. Okay, like here you can see the Bhimbetka and the other places also. So there are some caves, and why people started living in these areas, like in red triangle you can see there are Bhimbetka here, in this triangle Bhimbetka, and this Kurnul cave and this Hunski caves. And in these caves the archaeologists find some trace of the stone tools and some trace of the ash also. Means by these things archaeologists can predict that, means earliest people were using stone tools and they were using the fire also for cooking their food. Okay, means by these square, blue square and these red triangle, these are the place. In this blue square you can see these are the place where earliest people starting the farming, they starting agricultural work. And in the red triangle you can see these are the place where earliest people started living in a social manner. Okay, so that's why in this red triangle there are some rivers, and in these nearby these blue square also there are some. It means one point is very important, that is earliest people prefer to live nearby the river, because by the river they can get the water for their agriculture and for their daily use also. Okay, so student, next important point is the rock painting and what they tell us. A painting from a rock shelter describe the painting. Many of the caves in which these early people lived have painting on the walls. Some of the best examples are from Madhya Pradesh and southern Uttar Pradesh. These paintings show wild animal drawn with great accuracy and skills. Means these paintings are found in some caves in which the earliest people were living, and in Bhimbetka in present day, which is in Madhya Pradesh, this is an old site with caves and rock shelter. People choose these natural caves because they provide shelter from the rain, heat and wind. These rock shelters are close to the Narmada Valley. Can you think of why people choose to live here? People choose to live in caves which are nearby the river because caves provide shelter to them, and rivers provide water to them, and rivers also provide water for their farming. So student, in this lesson we have studied lots of important points related to the earliest people. And you know the lifestyle of earliest people means they were only living in the caves. Okay, they were not much developed as today's human beings, as today's men. Okay, so you can understand that what was their varieties of food and the beginning of farming and herding, a new way of life, storing animals, how they started storing animal, how they started agricultural work. You know about it, we have discussed about it in our earliest videos and the Zoom meetings also. Find out about the first farmer and herders, finding out, and towards a settled life, how they started living in a settled life, and what about other customs and practice. A closer look living and dying in Mehargarh, and a closer look to Dowsali heading. So let's revise these important points. So student, their variety of foods, what they were eating, what were the variety of their food. So earliest people were just dependent on plants, the natural plants. So they were getting their food from the plant that are grown, okay, that are grown itself, and the meat, animal that are reared. Okay, so these were the source of their food. Okay, and different plants and different condition. Slowly the earliest man can understand the way how different plants need different quantity of water. Means they can understand that, they learn about it, that if they want to grow rice, then rice needs more water, and if they want to grow wheat, the wheat needs less water in comparison of the rice. So if they want to grow rice, then they have to prefer to live nearby the river. So different animal prefer different environment. Slowly they also learn that if they want to herd the animal, then they have to understand the way of the animal's life and their breeding seasons also, okay, to herd them. So the way they understand that sheep and goats can survive in dry hills and cattle needs grassland to survive. Okay, so these were the important points that they understand. So the beginning of farming and herding. So student, by this chart you can understand that how early man started the farming and herding. So here you can see that how people become farmer. So they find some plants. Firstly they found some plants, okay, people, and then they understand seed brooks of stark fields on the ग्राउंड्स. ओके, स्टार्क जो, जब कोई भी सीड जो है वो ब्रेक होता है, उसके जो स्टार्क होते हैं वो ग्राउंड पे गिरते हैं, एंड न्यू प्लांट्स स्प्राउटेड फ्रॉम देम. Then they understand people protected the plants from birds and animals. They understand that if any plants grow and when they are very small, so they have to protect these little plants. When these little plants grow, then plants were grown and seed ripened, and then again they can use them. Edible plants were found, and this is the a process by which they can start the farming and herding. So the beginning of farming and herding. Now how they started herding animal, the process of it was also the same. Animal, how people become herder. Animal were tamed. First animal to be tamed was wild ancestors of dog. Okay, firstly they started tame to the wild ancestor of the dog, because dogs were living nearby the animals for the protection, because for the warmth. Okay, so other animals were encouraged to come near camp. Okay, so when you know that earliest men were living in the forest, in nearby the cave, the first dogs started to come nearby their society. Okay, and when dogs started to include with them, and when they were started living with the dogs, the wild dog, the ancestor of the present dog, not the dogs like the we can see and you can see in your area, the dog, they were very different, they were wild dogs. Okay, they were most dangerous than these dogs. So first they started living with the earlier man, and then other animal were encouraged to come near camp. Then other animal also encouraged to came nearby the human caves, and then sheep, goats, cattle and pigs ate grass and came near the camp. So why these animals were coming nearby the camp? Why dogs were coming nearby the camp? Because dogs were not capable to hunt as the human can hunt. So they were, when something left behind, means the leftover food of human beings, the dogs were eating them. That's why the dogs were coming behind the earliest man. Same, the sheep and the goat and the cattle were also coming for the food, because humans started and the earliest man started growing plants, growing trees, growing they started agricultural work. That's why sheep, goats and cattle also started coming near the earliest man, and then people protected these animals from the attack. Okay, and when they protect them from these attacks, they started herding them, they started petting them, they starting domesticization of these animals, and then they understand their breeding season, they understand that how they can use them, they understand that how to protect them and how to multiple them, how to multiply them, and then they started protecting these animals, and they started they started to protect domestic animal, and they turn them into domestic animal, and then and these animals, because these animals started providing them milk, meat, wool, etc. Student, now how they started a new way of life? How the early men started new way of life means, here you can see, student, first this people planted seeds and noticed that it takes some time to grow. Okay, means plants doesn't grow suddenly, means they need some time, and they stayed in the same place for a long time. Okay, if they have planted something, then they have to stay nearby these plantation, because they have to protect them, right? And after that they looked after the plant. Okay, they have to care them, they look after the plant, watering them, weeding them, and driving away animals and birds till grain ripped. Okay, and after that grain had to be stored for food and seed. Then they started making some utensils also, some pots also from the baskets, like they began making large clay pots and wove basket or dug pits into the ground to collect these grains and to store these grains which they were growing. Okay, so by this process earliest man started a new way of life. Means before this new way, they were just moving into the forest, going here to there, and just hunting and eating raw things from the nature. But when they started herding animals, and when some animals came near their camp, and they started growing plants, then they have to stay in a same place. Okay, they can't live a nomadic life. Nomadic life means they can't move from one place to the another place, they have to live in a particular place. Okay, for storing grains, means, students, you can understand that the earliest men were not much developed, their brain were not much developed that they can use utensil. There were not factory at that time that they can make large container of plastics and metal, but only they were using some natural things like the earthen or clay jars of pot. They were weaving basket, and they were digging some holes in the ground and dug pits into the ground to store grains. Now they also started storing animals. Students, why they started storing animals? Because storing animals, and these animals also helping them to provide food. Okay, sometimes nature doesn't give them favor. Okay, then maybe their crops destroyed by the nature, by the natural disaster, then they have to be dependent on the animals. Okay, like these animals providing them milk and meat, that's why people took care of animal, because they provide them food. Okay, so towards a settled life. Okay, how they started living in towards a settled life? Though this is also a very important question. Okay, like you can see that students, today we are living in a settled life. We have a house, we have a small society, we have a neighborhood, we have a village, a country, a world, and like this our society is very broad. But the earliest man, they were just learning these things firstly at that time. Means that was the first step of living like that. मीन्स अभी तो हम प्रेजेंट टाइम में ऐसे रह रहे हैं, बट दिस इज़ नॉट जस्ट केम कि firstly the earliest man just started to living like this. So when they were just started and they were learning to live in a society and they were learning to make a society कि कैसे एक society बनती है. So means as archaeologists find there was some pit house in Burjahom, Kashmir. Step lead the people into them. तो मतलब लोग जो है पहले उन पिट हाउसेज में रहते थे. प्रोवाइड शेल्टर इन कोल्ड वेदर एंड कुकिंग heathers inside the outside and the huts were found, so people cooked both indoor and outdoor. Understand? So student, I have also also tell you that Neolithic implements of stone, flint and horn. So these are the some instruments that the earliest people were using, and this time was known as the Neolithic time. But suddenly the Neolithic time doesn't come. Before this, some other periods also occur, and step by step this time came. Student, this long span of time, over 99% of human history, means which time the long stretch of time is divided into the lower, middle and upper Paleolithic time. Means these earliest man, वो जो है वो हमारी जो हम अभी हैं प्रेजेंट टाइम में है, वो हमारे इस हिस्ट्री का 99% जो है वो अर्लीस्ट ह्यूमन के अंदर ही आ जाता है. सो पैलियोलिथिक एज जो है एंड नियोलिथिक एजेस जो हैं, दीज एजेस कवर द 99% हिस्ट्री ऑफ ह्यूमन बींग्स. सो Paleolithic age means when they just using simple shaped stone tools like cutter and hand axes. Also they used used spear tips and sticks. And Neolithic age हम किसको बोलते हैं, how they divide into. देखो Paleolithic age में तो वो just simple tools use कर रहे थे stones के, means simple shaped stones tools like cutters and hand axes. But in Neolithic ages more advanced shaped tools like bow and arrow and harpoons, also they used spear tips. Okay, so you can understand that these tools are more developed than these tools, right? So we can understand that how humans developed at that time, and in present time our tools are more developed than these tools. Our tools, we are not using any stone tools, we just use metal tools. Okay, so you can understand that how these tools they discovered these tools and how they developed them. Next is characteristic of Neolithic tools and weapon and implements. They were polished to give a fine cutting edge. So mortars and pestles were used in grinding grains. You can see in these figures also. And many kind of earthen pots have been also found, sometimes decorated, that were used for storing things. Pots were used for cooking foods like rice, wheat and lentils. So students, how they started a settled life? They began weaving clothes by using different kinds of materials like animal skin and other. They started weaving clothes. What about other customs and practice? How they learn other things? Many of these farmers and herders lived in groups called tribes and followed certain practice that may have existed earlier. So now we will look a closer look living by and dying in Mehrgarh. Mehrgarh is in Jammu and Kashmir, and Mehrgarh located in a fertile plain near the Bolan Pass, which is one of the most important route into Iran. It is one of the earliest village that we know about. तो वहाँ पे आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट को कुछ ट्रेसेस मिले हैं अर्लीस्ट मैन के, जो अर्लीस्ट विलेज है, एंड वन ऑफ द प्लेस वेयर वुमेन एंड मैन लर्न टू ग्रो barley and wheat and rear sheep and goats for the first time in this area. Bones of animals like deer, pig, sheep, goat, cattle were found. Houses कैसे हैं मेहरगढ़ में? Houses, you can see the picture, like they were made of these sand and mud, and the roof were made of these branches and these leaves. Okay, so burial site in Mehrgarh. Archaeologists also find some burial sites. Several burial sites have been found at Mehrgarh, and in some case the dead person was buried with goats and sheep, which meant to serve as god in the next world. Means they believe in the next life after death. So and Daujali heading also found some traces also. So each site on the hill near Brahmaputra Valley close to road leading to China and Myanmar, वहाँ पे क्या मिले हैं traces, like you can see these stone tools were used there, and jadeite is a stone, that is a precious stone that may have been brought from China, has been also found here. So students, these are the important points of this chapter. I will send you worksheet related to this chapter, okay, according to your timetable. So read your chapter and do some practice about it, and learn, and you can draw these pictures and you can write down these important notes in your notebook also. All the best.